Welcome to another edition of WFUV's One-on-One Nightly, alongside Jack Rose and Chris Persianen. I'm Chris Hennessy. We're going to be bringing you an hour and a half of New York's longest-running sports call-in show here from 9:30 to 11 on a Wednesday night. Thank you for joining us on Twitter at WFUV Sports, YouTube, WFUV Sports, and anywhere else you might be getting this. Gentlemen, good evening, and how are we?
I was so excited to join One-on-One Nightly that I had to bust out a little trinket here. I've got the Knight logo, so obviously I'm very pumped up to talk some one-on-one with you guys.
Yes, it's.
Go for always it. A pleasure. Always a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you, Chris. Other Chris, main Chris one. Always a pleasure. It's my second run on One-on-One Nightly, and one that I hope will be, followed by many more runs to come. Can't wait to talk sports with you guys. You know how it goes.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. It was a big weekend, obviously. Super Bowl 55 down in Tampa. The Chiefs lose 31-9, and a surprising blowout, if I do say so myself. I think that, this was projected to be between a 3 and 10 point game, 10 at the most, really. And it turns out to be a three touchdown deficit for Kansas City. They don't score a touchdown for the first time in Pat Mahomes' career. Pat Mahomes himself looks very hobbled and is, as we speak, recovering from turf toe surgery. And Tom Brady, your boy, Jack Roach, wins his 7th. So let's start with Brady and the move Tampa Bay makes to go get him. The players he brings with him, and the Super Bowl they bring along with them. Think about Rob Gronkowski comes simply because of Tom Brady, as does Antonio Brown. They both score touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Leonard Fournette signed just at the beginning of the season. He has a fantastic game and scores a touchdown. This move cannot be understated, and it can only be matched by the move to go get Peyton Manning by Denver in 2014. That brings them a Super Bowl and another AFC title. And it's undeniable that he's just the greatest that has ever or might ever do this.
Yeah, we had Tiki Barber on a couple weeks ago, and he said that Brady is the first exception to this rule that you're never one guy away. And I think about it a little bit more, and I think about what you said, adding Gronk and Antonio Brown and Leonard Fournette. And maybe it's not just his own individual talent, but the culture that he brings with him. You saw guys like Mike Evans when they had the NFC Championship trophy ceremony. And he's like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, there are these guys that just don't know. I mean, how could I use words to summarize his greatness?
You're on mute, Chris, so I'll take it. I think that you can't, because the players he brings in are so important. And I kind of hated I think what Tiki said is right to a degree, where he's like the only guy who says, oh, you can't just take one guy, plug him in, and it's going to work in a 52-man roster. But I think that he's also wrong in the sense it's not just one guy. Because Evans and Godwin were invisible in the Super Bowl. They didn't really do anything. And it was Gronk and Antonio Brown. As much as I hate to say Antonio Brown was a huge part of the Super Bowl because, personally, I'm after the craziness that has ensued with his career. I don't love that he's getting another chance and has a Super Bowl ring on his finger, but that's a different conversation. It's undeniable that he was an important part of this team and is simply there because Tom Brady is there.
Yeah, I mean, we saw him, with New England. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For a very short
season. And, he was actually dropped from the team a couple weeks into that. Where that season was just so sad, such a sad way to end Brady's career in New England. But it's just he has this gravity effect that he can bring these guys with him to just the Patriots fan. I mean, he's getting very flustered and a little upset right now.
Well, as a Giants fan, you can take a guess as to, I mean, just where my opinion on Brady started. Becoming a sports fan for me happened in the early 2010s, and that's right when the Giants, had their little moment of two Eli championships. I grew up being taught, indoctrinated to despise Tom Brady by the Giants fan base. And now I just think the fact that we're all here, regardless of your team affiliation, you got to laugh. You just sit and laugh like, holy crap, he did it again. He did it again. 7, he did it again. I can only laugh at the, like you said, like the greatness. And it's almost like, I hate to just sit here and prop Tom Brady up because he doesn't need much propping up from me, but does he deserve it? Just like you guys both said, he goes in, he instills his culture. As you might have seen from their offense, second half of the year and really the end of the season and the postseason and on, Brady's kind of directing traffic out there a fair amount too. This is really his football team, and that's not to pull credit away from Todd Bowles and the defense, who did an incredible job. Like, wow, did they contain that so explosive Kansas City offense? But just the championship culture of the team in general. A guy who's done it so many times that at this point, if he lost to Lombardi, it's like, I got 6 others.
The bottom of the Atlantic.
At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. That'd be really interesting. But I think you said something interesting about Todd Bowles. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go log on Twitter. Tom Brady threw the Lombardi Trophy from one boat of a boat parade to another, and it was one of the more impressive things I've ever seen. I'm not gonna lie, very impressive. You mentioned Todd Bowles and his disastrous 2 seasons really with the Jets. The first one was very successful. Last 2, not so much. But being the coach of the Jets is a death sentence, as we all know. And as the defensive coordinator of the Buccaneers, he put together what could arguably be a top 5 performance by a defense we've seen in like recent Super Bowl memory. Number 1 is going to be OC and the Giants against the undefeated Patriots, but because they're the undefeated Patriots, 14 points, and they win the game. But ironically enough, Steve Spagnuolo in this game gives up 31 points to Brady, but I'm sure he'd have it the other way, the way that it happened, as opposed to flip it around. But I think Todd Bowles is going to get another chance at this head coaching position, and he absolutely deserves it after what we saw last week. And so is Byron Leftwich, too, who we kind of remember as a career backup. He started for a little bit, I think, in Jacksonville, but mostly career backup with the Steelers and the Buccaneers, I believe. In the NFL, he played at Marshall, and that's about it, and kind of disappeared. And then he shows up on Bruce Arians' staff in Arizona a couple of years ago, and now all of a sudden he's got a Super Bowl ring on his finger. He's going to end up being a head coach in the short future, and one of them probably taking over for Bruce Arians when he inevitably retires in the next, say, 2 to 3 years. So I think that those are 2 guys who we're going to – and obviously Eric Bieniemy, we know about him. We've talked about him at length. But in the Eric Bieniemy conversation, we have conversations about diversity in the NFL and the lack of black head coaches. Now you have 2 guys on the same team on different sides of the ball who have proven that they can do this at a very high level and are wearing Super Bowl rings. and they're going to get head coaching looks. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as another throwback to that Tiki interview, he mentioned some of the flaws in the head coaching hiring process. And we can sit here and scratch our heads. Why are these guys not getting jobs? And there's a huge part of that is the NFL's diversity problem. And another component of that is, how do you go from getting a team as a coordinator to win an NFL championship and then within weeks put together an entirely different coaching staff with a different team? You know, we see guys like Josh McDaniels with the Patriots not always getting that head coaching offer because he's making deep runs in the playoffs. And unfortunately, it would be a shame to see Bieniemy and Todd Bowles suffer from that same issue as guys that just do their job super well and take their teams into deep playoff runs.
Yeah. The recent, additions in terms of the rule book and just not even rules, but more the incentives to hire more diverse head coaches should certainly result in a greater percentage of just diversity, a greater apparent, diversity being more apparent in the league. And we always say it's not like there's always people responding, oh, well, it's about hiring the best person for the job. And it's about hiring. Tampa Bay's coaching staff you look at that coaching staff top to bottom. That is a quite diverse coaching staff. That is evidence that there are people all over the world who can do these jobs, and it doesn't have to be the exact mold that you once thought it did. And it's awesome for me to see these different stories of coaches, former players, even in the NBA, to name a different example, guys like agents getting opportunities to lead teams and getting interviews and just for these greater opportunities is just encouraging sports wide. Just to find that we're finally starting to see some of the diversity in these positions that we've been waiting for a while.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that these guys will definitely be head coaches, all three of them, to be honest. I think there's a chance that one of those two guys in Tampa takes over for Arians, and there's a chance that Bieniemy takes over for Reed at some point. Reed's a little bit younger. He's in his early 60s, and Arians is in his late 60s. But those guys could certainly retire pretty soon. And the odd man out in Tampa, whether it's Leftwich or Bowles, especially if it's Leftwich, I think, who is unproven as a head coach and has put together a great offense, would get a lot of good looks. And we'll see how that pans out. But we said that about Bieniemy 3 years ago, and he's still the offensive coordinator for Kansas City. So who knows? Unless somebody else knows something we don't know about Andy Reid and his contract status and his potential, and if he retires, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but that's, to me, the only reason Eric Bieniemy isn't a coach is what you said, Jack, that he keeps going deep into the playoffs, or that Andy Reid is going to retire. We talked about the legacy conversation for Brady. He's the greatest ever. It was before this, it was true. After this, it's true. Is it more true? Fine. If you want to say it's more true, whatever. He's the greatest ever. Leave it at that. The legacy conversation for Mahomes that's been happening in the last couple of days is really interesting to me because I personally don't think he played a bad game, but he did not play like the worst game ever. He played the worst game of his career, which, I mean, he's had the best start to his career of any quarterback in NFL history, just about. He had won 25 of 26 games, I believe, coming into this one. Now it's 25 of 27. That's not so bad either. He's injured against a great defense with a destroyed offensive line. And there's every excuse in the world for this team to lose this game. And was he good? No. But he made 2 or 3 passes that were unbelievable. I mean, the one that's going to live on forever is the one where he's completely sideways and hits Darrell Williams in the face. But I think that the game was there for as crazy as it sounds. But if Mahomes played exactly how he played, I think a couple things go the other way, and this is a closer game than it was. Mahomes is not out of the legacy conversation to me at this point. There's a long way to go before we get there.
Oh, totally. He's 25 years old. I mean, it's not like his career's over. But to me, Mahomes has been the biggest threat to this undisputed GOAT title we keep tossing around. There have been guys like Aaron Rodgers, or even at a time, a guy like Russell Wilson, who looked like they could challenge that. But no one has had the success that Mahomes has had this early into their career. And this was a game where he kind of had a chance to really elevate himself beyond other people in their contention to Brady's throne, whatever you want to call it. And whatever Mahomes does for the rest of his career, because you know it's going to be great. You know he's going to be back in the Super Bowl again. He's going to win MVPs. But at the end of the day, we're never going to be able to forget the time when Brady beat Mahomes when he was 43 years old.
And 41 years old. Or 40, 41. The AFC Championship game.
Yeah, of course.
Right, just recently.
D Ford offsides.
Right, D Ford was offsides. That wasn't Mahomes' fault at all. But yeah, you're shaking your head, Chris. Yeah, that was really annoying. But yeah, I think you're 100% right, and I think that something Romo said at the end of the game was really interesting. He said the game was clearly over, and Mahomes is sitting on the bench, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this young man, he's amazing, yeah." And he said something like, "If Mahomes wins this game, and it's 6-2, that feels doable, but 7-1 feels really, really hard, and you can't deny that. You can't. 8 is a lot of 8's more championships than anybody in history. So is 7. That's a lot of championships."
I can't disagree with that. I'm with Jack though in terms of Mahomes' career outlook. I think he's so young. This is just, man, if players are going to be learning empirically, from their mistakes, from this guy's had no mistakes to learn from. He's allergic to playing a bad game. His QBR is just never too low, and he's always just giving you elite quarterback performance. I think it's so early in his career, this is going to feel like a big loss right now, because how many other Super Bowls that Mahomes appeared in do we have to compare it to? Not many.
Right.
And for an athlete of his just level of talent, elite production and elite talent, we have high expectations. We know there are more Super Bowls coming, not just appearances. You have to assume Lombardis are going to be on the way to Patrick Mahomes' house. Or the Chiefs facility rather, but the finals MVPs will go to Mahomes' house. But just, it's too early for me to make any large statements in either direction about this loss. It's as if a stock just opened up on the market, and it has a huge spike at first, and then it has a noticeable dip, and you're sitting there like, man, that's a big dip. I don't know going forward. It's too early. There's been nothing really to compare it to. You don't have enough just history. You don't have enough game logs to look at. It's clear from the eye test that this guy is an elite talent, someone that I'm willing to hand the keys to my franchise to. Can't make any strong statements in either direction. I'm not going to say, oh, he played a perfect game and his team failed him. I'm not going to say he stunk it up and they would have won if they had Eli Manning at age 44 starting a quarterback. I can't. I'm not going to say anything crazy either way. I think this is going to be a loss, and Mahomes' Super Bowl record, one that is going to, whether with wins or losses, pile up to include a great amount of appearances over the course of his career. I can't see this having too great of an effect on his legacy overall.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's the first real blemish of a resume that has basically none, and will probably have very little by the end of what already you could argue was a Hall of Fame career from Pat Mahomes. So it was a blowout, and we know it was a blowout. But the first half of this game was one of the most poorly officiated 30 minutes of professional sports I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm not the kind of person who likes to rag on officials. I think that it's the hardest job in the world. And outside of like the Saints-Rams pass interference game and, maybe a couple Islander games I got too mad at, I don't really rag on officials too often. But out loud in my living room on Sunday, I said, swallow the damn whistle. It's the Super Bowl. like every play it was a flag, and there was one that was just a complete phantom defensive holding that gave Tampa Bay a first down. There was the field goal that turned into the Gronk touchdown. I personally did not see McCole Hardman as offside. I don't know about anybody else. I didn't see it, and if he was, it was by a hair. It's like you got to swallow the whistle. It's the Super Bowl, man. Like I don't understand that. It didn't make an impact on the game at the end of the day. They lost by 22, but I don't know what you saw, Chris, but to me, the first half was just frustrating, and sure it didn't have an impact, but it's still something that impacted the game in some kind of way.
Yeah, you can say that the officiating, if you put in robot, refs that would make a certain average percentage of correct calls, you could say, oh, the game would have been more in the Chiefs' favor. It was a blowout, as you said. So I'm not going to sit here and say, man, I know not even just the butterfly effect. It's a little more direct here. I know, a bad call at the beginning can have an effect on the morale throughout the game and the willingness to even compete. It's frustrating to sit and to be watching this game and wanting to see Mahomes versus Brady, Evans, Godwin versus Hill, Kelsey, the Tampa Bay defense, and then be sitting there and feel like you're watching a 3-team contest with the refs having way more input than you'd like. Just last night I was watching Knicks Heat, and it was quite poorly officiated in my opinion. And I'm in your camp here. I don't like to rag on officials either. I respect the position a lot, but there are some games where you just sit and you're like, damn, I wish I could know what this game would look like if it were just the talent going head to head, just the talent, just the teams matching up.
I just want to know what Chris Hennessy, I understand that, the flags made an impact on the game, but in what world did you see the Chiefs like a couple plays that it could have gone a different way?
No, look, you can't deny that the McCole Hardman offsides and the field goal added 4 points to the Buccaneers. That's just an indisputable fact because the next play Gronk scores a touchdown. The rest of it, yeah, of course. They'll get fine. So take off 4 off 22 and you're at 18. Fine. It's an 18 game. They're not going to win. I understand that they're not going to win, but it doesn't mean that the officiating was good. Just because it's a blowout doesn't give the officiating a free pass. That's all I'm saying. And I think that we're having a very different conversation right now, and the officials are in much higher, a much better, much bigger topic, I should say. If this game is 31-24, I think that's a much bigger topic. But I think if you just the halftime show, not the singing part. I think if you, I think it was Boomer. I think it was Boomer Esiason who was just like, man, that was really poorly officiated. Like it was poorly officiated half. And yes, it was a blowout. And yes, they were killing them at halftime too. And I'm not denying that. And the Buccaneers are Super Bowl champions and there's no asterisks on it. And there's no, but they dominated the game thoroughly. But the officials sucked.
Is this going to be something we remember, though? Like, are we going to look back?
No, probably not. I'm probably going to forget it by like tomorrow. But it was really annoying in the moment. I just felt like we needed to bring that up because I personally, I didn't see a lot of the. I don't know. It felt like they could have swallowed the whistle in the first half a little bit. And it would have been an easier game to watch, but it would not have won the Chiefs the game. I'm not saying that. They didn't play well enough to win. And Shaq Barrett and Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea and Lavonte David had, again, as we said, one of the best games a defense could ever put together. And they deserve to be rewarded for that, and they won the Super Bowl. And they would have won the Super Bowl if the officials weren't even there. But I don't know. I just felt like it sucked the air out of the first half that led to it being a blowout.
How much impact do you think that has on the players? Like when they feel like the game's rigged against them, like it's going the other way?
Well, I think in this situation, the one specific one would be taking the points when the Buccaneers accepted the offsides penalty, took the points off the board, and scored a touchdown on the next play. I think that's the most deflating thing that happened in this game. Because finally, you're like, okay, we held them to a field goal. Let's get the ball back. Let's get something before the half and get out of here in a one-possession game. And now all of a sudden it's a three-possession game, and you don't have enough time to get the ball back. I think that was terribly deflating, personally.
It's like you said it perfectly. It takes the air out of the room. It's deflating to not to pick a no pun intended.
Brady's used to that.
He is very.
That's where I was going with that one.
At least you said it, Jack. You can't.
Hey, I don't mind. It's
being
all
anti-Brady haters because you were the one who said it. Speaking of the halftime show, I personally, not a pop music guy myself. Enjoyed but didn't love. I know, Chris, you were a huge fan. We talked about that earlier today. Jack, your thoughts?
Huge fan of the show. I saw a statistic that the weekend streams have been up almost 400% from the time of the show. He's like the number one artist in the world right now. And what I loved about it, this isn't very, sporty, but it spanned across his whole discography. We had stuff from old The Weeknd.
This is the real analysis.
Oh yeah.
This is what the people are paying for.
Your podcast.
Exactly.
I do agree though, Jack. I as someone who's been listening to The Weeknd for a couple years, just cool to see the rise. You start following a prospect in high school. Hey, that guy looks pretty good. Yeah, might make it to the league one day, and then you're seeing LaMelo Ball finally put up 3-pointers in the NBA, and you're like, man, that feels cool. It's not you in the NBA, but it still feels cool. Similar feeling here with The Weeknd.
Yeah,
it was not me up on that stage. Nope.
I know what you mean, but
you would have crushed it though, Chris, if you did.
Yeah, thank you, Jack.
I think they would have loved some breakdown of Knicks Heat
with the red suit on too.
Exactly. Excuse me. I think that it was fun. I think that there, in my eyes, have been better ones, and there certainly have been worse ones, though. So we can't deny that. But overall, it was a little bit of a snooze fest, but a blowout and a Buccaneers victory. I'm curious because I was not on any sort of pre-NFL show with you guys. What were your predictions, your thoughts about, I'm sure Jack's are different than mine, of the Buccaneers going into this season? Because personally, I did not see this happening. Even coming into the playoffs, I did not see this happening. It took me until the Super Bowl to think maybe this can happen. I still picked the Chiefs like an idiot. I think being a Jets fan for my entire life, which spans 21 years, I'd figure it out, but I didn't figure it out. So I personally didn't see it, but I'm curious what you guys. You guys were thinking back in August and September.
Well, I didn't think it was going to work. I thought at the beginning of the season, part of that thought process was probably just me being a butthurt fan. But then come playoff time, every single game that they went into, I thought they were going to lose. I thought they were going to lose to the Chiefs. And I before the game was thinking the only way that they win this game is if they put up over 30 points. What I did not foresee happening was them holding the Chiefs to 9 points. So I think just about everything went right for the Bucs, and that's the reason why Tom Brady's throwing the Lombardi trophy off of boats right now.
I went into the Super Bowl in agreement with both of my co-hosts on one of my podcasts that everything on paper pointed to the Buccaneers being in position to win this football contest. The matchups, the trenches, just how to win a football game. It was in the Bucs' favor. And because Patrick Mahomes, all three, including myself, co-hosts of the pod, picked the Chiefs to win the game. My one co-host actually almost perfectly predicted how the game was going to go on both sides of the field for both teams and still picked the Chiefs because he thought Mahomes would be able to overcome the challenges. It didn't happen this year. As I said earlier, young player, bright career ahead of him. Not too worried about this one loss, but the losses they're there, right? At the end of a career. Even you're talking about NBA greats, right? LeBron's finals record. People love to bring that one up. So the losses are there, and they're not erasable. And Mahomes didn't play a great game, but I think this will be fine for the Chiefs long term. I did have them winning coming into it. I just thought, man, if anyone is in position to overcome the odds, the downhill odds put in their face by Bowles, the defense, Brady's machine offense, it would be Patrick Mahomes. I did the same thing last year. I predicted the 49ers to win, and then hypothetically, of course, for legal reasons, bet on the Chiefs to win the game. Just because I thought Mahomes could do it, and I made the same choice this year. However, to a less favorable result, as we know.
Yeah, very, very interesting how it ended up playing out. Tampa Bay has both Shaq Barrett and Chris Godwin as free agents, so we'll see how intact the team is coming into September as the Super Bowl 55 champion. Speaking of the NFL offseason, we're going to take a quick break and hit you with some QB carousel stuff coming out of this one. Stick with us, and we'll be back in a minute. One-on-one Nightly coming back with Jack Roach, Chris Persianen. I'm Chris Hennessy. We just discussed Super Bowl 55 at length, which means football season is unfortunately over. Which means we are about a month away, March 17th, from the beginning of free agency. And between now and then, we could see a couple of quarterbacks change places. Starting, we have Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, has requested a trade. Looks like he might go to Chicago or Indianapolis. Matt Stafford has already gone to LA in exchange for Jared Goff and 2 first-round picks. And what we have left after that is 2 of the top 5, if you ask me, quarterbacks in the National Football League, potentially looking to switch teams. So Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Russell Wilson is a new one, so we'll start with him. He's on the Dan Patrick Show. And he doesn't say that he wants to be traded, but he doesn't deny it either. He basically says that his availability is in the Seahawks' hands, and it's not up to him. And he wants more say in management procedures. To me, Russell Wilson is a very interesting candidate for a team who's ready to win but doesn't have a quarterback. The team might be Indianapolis. The team might be maybe like a Denver, although that's a little bit on the outside, maybe a San Francisco. He doesn't seem like a Jets fit to me, even though maybe in Miami, but even though they have the most draft picks in this first round along with Miami. So we'll start with Wilson and his kind of surprising want out of Seattle, Jack.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember back when the Patriots played the Seahawks in the Super Bowl.
Hey, wow, that took about 2.5 minutes for you to bring up the Patriots.
Well, let me explain. Last season, they lost the Super Bowl, and this was still when they were like the Legion of Boom Seahawks. They were a great team. And what did they do? They traded their center, Max Unger, and they got Jimmy Graham. And that was really the beginning of the end for this great Seahawks team. And now we're at a point where Russell Wilson's saying that he's taken too many hits. And what was the position that they traded away back then? It was their center. I understand Wilson's frustration. And you see the team that won the Super Bowl kind of let their quarterback call some of the shots. And I'm sure that guys like Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson are taking notes and saying, hey, why can't I do that?
Man, it's tough when a star quarterback is when they want out. I mean, there's just, that change will result in a lot of news. That the quarterback leaving where they're going will have to go somewhere else, and hence we get to the QB carousel. It's exciting. It's exciting to see QB movement. In terms of Wilson, you can't say you're surprised, because it's like, if you really think about it, he had Shoddy for all those years, and everyone's like, let Russ cook. And Shoddy's like, we are going to run this football so many times that you are not going to believe it. Chris Carson, usage through the roof. I can see Russ getting frustrated with that. I can see Russ getting frustrated with the lack of protection.
That they just fired Brian Schottenheimer?
They fired Shoddy, and I guess whoever they brought in to replace him did not necessarily pique the interest of Wilson, because for this request to come out kind of shortly after that hiring doesn't seem like a total coincidence to me. Man, I saw a tweet when the Seahawks lost to the Rams that said, can't wait for the Seahawks to spend their first-round pick on defense and then wonder why Wilson keeps getting sacked so much by Aaron Donald. And that's exactly what's going to happen.
It's funny because they already spent their first-round pick on defense in August.
Yep.
Trading into the Jets.
So what did they trade for again, Chris Hennessy? What was that trade again?
Jamal Adams. And look, I hated it. I hate it still.
The decibel level just went all the way down.
I hated the trade. I do, but it's the reason that the Jets are going to end up with freaking Deshaun Watson. So I'm not upset about it.
The Jets fleeced the Seahawks. As a Giants fan, it pains me to say that Joe Douglas pulled off a masterclass on that deal.
I agree with you. And yeah, 2 first-round picks for a safety is clinically insane. But when you look at the history of the New York Jets and the draft picks over the last, literally named the amount of years, basically since Sanchez, they've all sucked. So like to trade the only one that was good away hurts. But now he's the only reason they're able to get Deshaun Watson. So I don't know. I think in the Russell Wilson situation, I can totally understand why he's upset, and I get it, but it's still surprising where he's the franchise quarterback there. He has been for many years. He's settled in, and he loves the coach, and him and the coach are on good terms, seemingly, but maybe not. And you would think that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson would be able to figure this out together in a way to kind of attack this offseason as a duo who clearly both want the best for Russell Wilson. That's kind of where my disconnect begins, because when compared to the Deshaun Watson situation, right? They just fired Bill O'Brien, and they hired this new guy who Deshaun Watson didn't have any say in. They hired a new GM who Deshaun Watson didn't have any say in, and that's kind of where that disconnect happens. This is a trio in GM, coach, and quarterback who have been together for the entirety of Russell Wilson's career. So if this has been an issue for a long period of time, why are we just learning about it now? And if it's a new issue, how come it can't be handled internally, where they've been able to figure out a lot together, including dismantling the Legion of Boom and still putting together a pretty good defense, and drafting DK Metcalf and getting in offensive weapons and Tyler Lockett over the past couple of years. So that's kind of where my confusion kind of begins. Is this isn't a new grouping of people? This is an old grouping of people who's having new issues that don't make any sense.
But where do you think Wilson is at? Like there's definitely like a spectrum of, hey, I'm a little upset with how things are going versus, hey, I'm Deshaun Watson and you got to get me on the first plane out of Houston. Like where is Wilson in that level of disgruntled? Like can they run it back with that team?
I would think that they can with another offensive lineman, but again, they already traded away their next two first-round picks.
Or a box safety. Man.
Sure.
Man. Sure. With Wilson, I am finding in my quest to both learn about sports, be a sports fan, be a more obsessed sports fan. I'm learning over time that when you see a headline or you see a story or hear a quote and you listen and you're like, that doesn't add up. There's something else there. There's something that we don't know about as fans going on behind the scenes. You are right most of the time. I find that even when you don't think that there's something you don't know about going on behind the scenes, there's stuff that you don't know about. It's just there's so many aspects of team management. I often forget. I almost intended to say people forget people. I forget that this is not just real life Madden. They didn't just take Madden and bring it to real life. It's quite the other way around. You've got to have people that can work with other people. Your GM and coach and president all have to be in tune, in sync. And to me, it seems like here in Seattle, these conversations, these football conversations, hey, here's the vision, here's our plan. It was just reported when they hired the new offensive coordinator that he had talked to Carroll and that they were both totally on board with each other's visions. And Carroll trusted him, and Carroll saw his vision as one worth carrying out and one that he would let this new OC carry out. So the head coach seemed to be very on board with this OC pickup. And now we have Wilson coming out and saying, I would like to be more involved in decisions. It seems like maybe they've just been talking him off this ledge of asking out for a while now. And this is just, he's finally done. They hired that OC. I'm out of here. They didn't get my guy, and I'm Russell Wilson, and they didn't get my guy. Give me my respect. I'm out of here. It might be something as simple as that. There's always, just as I was saying, there's just always something more with these stories, something we don't know about. It could have been, it could be something like a text that rubbed Russ the wrong way that just made him start thinking, what is my future here with this organization? And do I see myself winning a Super Bowl here? No, I know. And wanting to move on, a whole plethora of things could have gone down. These things happened. The reason I said at first that I wasn't necessarily incredibly surprised was that I think if you told anyone listening to this show, anyone that's participating as a host of this show, that James Harden was not only not going to be a Houston Rocket, but going to be a Brooklyn Net in the year 2021, nobody would have believed you a year ago. So things change real fast with star players, and we're at a time now where they're getting where they want to go.
Yeah, I think the NBA is a different animal than the NFL in that sense.
For sure.
If you told me James Harden was not going to be a Houston Rocket, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Like, is he even going to is Kyrie Irving even going to be playing basketball? Or is he going to be at a club party? I don't know. Things happen. Is Derrick Rose going to disappear from the Knicks again? Is he going to be on the Knicks? Who the heck knows? But I think a lot of what you said there is true. And I think let's skip Deshaun Watson because we've beaten that horse dead.
He's going to the Jets.
I'm confident he's going to be a Jet, which I'm not.
Miami.
Wilson.
Douglas isn't skipping steps. Miami has the best offer for getting a QB to develop now and for future draft capital. It's been my guess. It will be my guess. And
I like to be positive, so sue me. Let's talk about Carson Wentz because in my eyes, there is one landing spot for him that is a match made in heaven. Go.
There.
Oh.
Go. You Bears?
Bears.
I mean, if you're talking about the perfect fit for him, I'd think a place like Indianapolis might be better.
It's so clearly Indianapolis, and here's why. Frank Reich was the offensive coordinator of the Eagles when they beat your beloved Patriots in the Super Bowl, Jack. And it took me 14 minutes. It only took you 2. And they have a really good roster. They have a really good offensive line and receivers. Yeah, Carson Wentz's contract is insane, and his play last year was not good. But the only time his play was good was with Frank Reich. Now, the contrary opinion to that is his only good play was with a fully healthy ACL, which he now doesn't have because he had ACL surgery. I understand that, but he was also the MVP of the league when he tore his ACL at the Coliseum in, what was it, like week 14? It was late in the season. He was playing like the MVP of the league his rookie season with Frank Reich. So for me, reuniting with Frank Reich, that'd be a nice package going back to the Eagles for Frank Reich's boy, Nick Sirianni, who got that job. Would it be insider trading? Yeah, I guess. But I think that it's the perfect fit. Roach, why do you say Chicago?
You ready? I'm going to give you a much quicker response, okay? Who is the backup quarterback in Chicago?
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, but who was the offensive coordinator? Who drew up the play? Who drew up the play? Who cares who's sitting on the bench? Nick Foles didn't do anything to help Carson.
He brought a championship to Philly.
Hey, I mean,
he won the game.
You gotta, I gotta say, now I was just making this note about having, people in organizations. I gotta give Jack a little bit of credit here. They were together in the QB room all year. They talked. They were friends. They were sharing knowledge on plays. Hey, watch out for Alshon on this route. They miss him, and I think he's onto something. I think he's onto something.
But who drew up the plays for Alshon? It's Frank Reich. I think that him going to the Bears would be very interesting, but I think
it's the place that makes the most sense.
The Bears is the place that makes most sense.
Just from a business standpoint, like the dealings behind the scenes.
You ready for this?
For who's making what offer?
Nick Foles, Tariq Cohen, first round pick, Carson Wentz. That's a deal. Done.
But the Eagles don't want Nick Foles back. They have Jalen Hurts. That's the whole point.
Yeah, but Nick Foles is going to mentor Jalen. In the same way.
Man.
And you're going to have Carson Wentz and Mitch Trubisky be a quarterback room? I mean, light the place on fire at that point. Like, what are we talking about?
Isn't Mitch
that's like, man. I'm going to go. I got to go get. I can't even think of a replacement. I got to go get Christian Hackenberg to mentor Joey Burrow.
Exactly. Like, I don't see a reason why you would trade Nick Foles away. For me, I don't think Nick Foles is necessarily tradable, and putting Carson Wentz on that team leaves you with 2 quarterback salaries until you're a way to get away from Nick Foles. Mitch Trubisky may not be tradable. I don't know. Chicago's quarterback room is very interesting. No doubt.
Trubisky's off the books this year.
Oh, that's right. Trubisky's a free agent because they didn't pick up his option. That's right. I forgot about that.
And Phil, you got to remember, if Philly trades Wentz, in most situations here, they're going to have to eat some of that contract. So in my eyes, I think that Foles makes sense because you almost don't have to worry about that if you're just paying Foles a ton of money.
Yeah, I guess. But for Indianapolis, if you're talking dollars, they don't have a quarterback to pay, right? They have literally nobody playing quarterback because Philip Rivers retired.
Brissett, right?
Well, yeah, but in terms of the large salary, they have no large salary quarterback on their roster. And 2 of their best players, Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson, are on rookie contracts and coming up on needing new, very large contracts. So if you're able to trade for Carson Wentz, where Philadelphia eats some salary, and now Indianapolis is paying some of it, that saves a little bit of money to go towards Darius Leonard and Quentin Nelson, which was what Carson Wentz would need to succeed in Indianapolis with Frank Reich. I don't know. That seems to make the most sense to me. I could see him going to Chicago, but I think that deal is going to be a little bit harder because I don't know. I feel the Frank Reich Carson Wentz connection in my bones. I also think that if Carson Wentz had a choice, I don't know Carson Wentz. I've never met him. I don't know. But I feel like he would choose Frank Reich, right? Like,
but how much power does he have?
He doesn't. But I think that if you're saying, like, where is he going to play the best, I think it's Indianapolis because he wants to be with Frank Reich again. Like, that's the situation which he's going to succeed the most, in my opinion, because of the connection with Frank Reich. But look, maybe Frank Reich just sat there and slept during all the meetings, and it really was Carson Wentz's right name. I have no idea, but to me, that's the place for him.
Beggars can't be choosers, man. Carson Wentz can't really pick destinations on his contract, unfortunately.
Watson can, though.
Yeah, that's because he's a stud.
Oh yeah, it's a little bit different on the talent.
And look, wait, when the Eagles signed Carson Wentz, he was a stud. It was 2 weeks away from winning the MVP, and then tore his knee. They had no idea he was going to stink. I think if you're Carson Wentz and you look at the last 2 years of your career and the disaster it's been since Frank Reich left the building, you're dying to go get back in his hands again. Dying. But we'll see how that turns out for Carson Wentz. And looks like Jalen Hurts will be the starting quarterback of the Eagles going forward. But you never know. And March 17th, the free agency date, and then obviously the draft is in April. So a lot of good stuff coming out of the NFL post Super Bowl 55. We're going to take a 2-minute break here. We're going to come back with some NBA stuff, some local Brooklyn, some Brooklyn, some New York, and just some general NBA stuff coming up after this. Stay with us. Nightly. Chris Persian and Jack Roach with me. I'm Chris Hennessy. We're going to hit some NBA local stuff, maybe a little bit of national stuff if we have the time. But the first time in a really, really long time, New York City is the hub of two really large basketball stories when you look at it. Let's start with the Nets. They win tonight 104-94. They beat the Pacers. Kevin Durant is in the middle of what is a ridiculous, insane COVID situation. I've not been really a fan of the Nets and how they've handled things, and this is not the Nets' fault. This is very odd. If you missed it, it was Friday night. He was pulled off the court in mid-game because of a close contact that ended up testing positive, but he had already played over 20 minutes, and they didn't quarantine the rest of the Nets and the Raptors, and they just kind of kept moving. And they're kind of just lucky at this point that KD isn't positive and he hasn't spread it to everybody else. But Very odd situation there. So they win without him tonight. Seems like they're pulling it together a little bit. They hold the Pacers to under 100 points, which is very impressive, considering that they play defense like an all-star game. So just in general, we'll start with Jack. Your thoughts on Brooklyn since Kyrie has come back, since the Harden trade kind of looks like they're rounding into form a little bit.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a little bit right now. I don't think we've learned all too much about the Nets yet. We've seen the offense and we've seen the defense, and tonight I guess is possibly an exception to that, holding a team to fewer than 100 points. But the offense has been electric, and the defense has been the opposite of that. We've got Kyrie going to the media and being upset, and we've seen that year in and year out. I just don't know what conclusions we can necessarily draw for them. And listen, we're a third of the way into the season. I still think that the Nets team at game 72 is going to be a lot different than the team that we see now.
With the Nets, for me, I think we're past the point where the shiny new toy is, you get a new pair of sneakers, you spend all day staring at those things. You get a new hoodie, you're wearing it, man. And then eventually, after a couple weeks, you're like, yeah, this is one of the pairs of shoes that I own. This is a piece of clothing. We're getting to the point with Brooklyn where the fans, I'm noticing the Nets fans, which as a Knicks fan is quite the treat to see online, a little upset. Why did we make this trade? What was the vision here? What were we thinking? With Brooklyn, for me, it's going to come down to the trade deadline, and not just the trade deadline, also the window after to sign who I call the ring chasers, those vets that go and fill out those contending squads. It's going to come down to how they handle those situations, how Sean Marks and the front office can tackle that. I don't think with where they're at right now that they have the full roster needed to contend for a championship. I think they absolutely have the star power in place. Indubitably, you can't even try. What are you doing if you're trying to argue the Nets don't have star power? However, we're noticing that that's not enough, right? The Toronto Raptors, led by Kawhi Leonard, won that championship. They did it with a team of plus defenders from top to bottom. You've got to have depth. You've got to have 3-and-D guys for your stars. You've got to have big men that are not. It's 2021. And we're doing DeAndre Jordan? Really? They're starting Jeff Green at center because that's a better option now. It's like, man, they have some needs to address. And I am going to be out on them come playoff time if they do not address those needs. I had them finishing as the 4th seed this year. I did not predict a top 3 finish for Brooklyn. This was, of course, before the Harden trade, but I couldn't see them, even with LeVert and Dinwiddie and that additional depth, having what it took to be one of those just like machines at the top of a conference. And now having gutted their depth for James Harden, it's going to come down, as I said, to what kind of players they can acquire at the deadline and even shortly after it, before I can really judge them as true championship contenders.
Yeah, I think what you said there is interesting. And I was on the show with Andrew Galata and Kelly Bright right after the Harden trade, right after they lost those 2 games to Cleveland, if you remember back that far, in January. And I remember I said, and Kelly and I think Andrew both agreed, that the team was better pre-Harden, in my opinion. I think that a guy with the defensive ability and the height and the length of Jared Allen is still necessary to some degree, especially when the 2 teams you're really going against are Milwaukee and LA, and they have Giannis and Anthony Davis. And is that partially just looking at the heights of players on a roster and saying, well, they don't have a guy who can guard? Yeah, it's partially that I'm not going to deny it. But they also don't have a talented player to defend those guys. And at the end of the day, the Lakers run through LeBron, of course, but both Milwaukee and LA run through a guy that the Brooklyn Nets can't guard right now. And can they score? Yes, they can score with anybody. If you put those guys out there against a legitimate all-star team, it's possible they win the game because they score every single time down the floor. I will not deny that. But it's hard for me to believe in this team right now because I think you have a coach who's in way over his head. You have a team who can't play defense to save their lives, and the four of us on the Zoom call might be able to put up 2 points on them because, God, it's a disaster, man. Like yeah, tonight was a great win, 104-94. Like that's a regular NBA score, but tomorrow night or the next time they play, it'll be 137, 134. Or even last night, they lost to Detroit. They gave 122 points to Detroit. They're the worst team in basketball. They'll give 135 points to the next team they play. It's I don't know, man. I'm not buying right now. And that's crazy to say with 3 superstars on the team.
Let me push back on that a little bit.
Let's hear it, Jack.
You talk about the team looking better before the trade. We knew that these growing pains were going to be there. You know, you don't just snap your fingers and 3 studs play their best basketball together. We saw that with the Heat's big 3. It took a bit of time for them to get in their flow. So that's
the difference is Eric Spoelstra is a legitimate coach. And Steve Nash has no idea what he's doing. He has no clue.
So then how can you applaud the team for playing well earlier in the season if it's the same coach?
Because they had camaraderie. They were together for more than 12 seconds. And
so give it some time, man. I don't That's why I'm saying give it some time. And here's a number. They've played – I listened on Monday to the Athletics podcast on the Nets. They've played 8 games against teams over 500. What do you think their record's been? Both Chris's. I want to hear it.
It's probably 7-1, but then I want to hear the record.
I was gonna say 6-2.
7-1. It's 7-1. And listen, that doesn't bode well for the games when they play the Pistons and they play the Cavs and give up 150 points. But what I'm saying is they're going to get those games out of their systems now, and when they need to show up, they have shown up.
So what you're telling me is they're 5-10 against teams who are at or below 500. No, sorry. 15 minus 7 is 8. 8-11 against teams that are at or below 500.
Listen, I'm not a mathematician.
That's not good.
I just call it how
That's not good. And especially in the NBA when like half the teams who make the playoffs or have like 26 wins. So like it doesn't really matter.
Standings right now. Like everyone is lumped into that category. Like it's just been a funny year. Good teams have lost bad games.
Yeah, not
Listen,
in Washington though.
I have to push back on something Chris said just a bit ago. I think 2 points is underselling us a little bit. Shout out to our producer Alex Wools. People may not know this, but
you can guess what the joke.
Alex and I run a mean pick and roll. So listen, I don't know if Kevin's arms might not be long enough.
So we'll switch over to the Knicks because the Nets are a very contentious topic. But I'm curious to see where we sit come May. And if they win their last 11 games, then I'll change my mind. But for right now, I'm not buying. But the Knicks go out and trade for Derrick Rose. They trade Dennis Smith Jr. and a 2021 second-round pick to regain Derrick Rose. If you remember, he was on the team, and as I alluded to earlier, he was Kyrie before it was cool. He did go missing, if you remember that, and didn't report to the team. But he comes back, and it's with Tom Thibodeau, who was his coach the MVP season in Chicago. So that's a nice mix. And the second unit, led by Derrick Rose, looked very good last night against Miami. And I think it's an interesting pickup. The only reason I don't like it is they're giving up a draft pick as a rebuilding team. It's a little odd to give up a draft pick for a guy in his 30s who's well on the other side of his prime. But he's a guy who can help Emmanuel quickly as long as he doesn't take away minutes from him, Chris. It's fine by me, although it's a little weird.
As a Knick fan, I decided not to react to the Derrick Rose trade. I saw the news and I said, wow, Tom Thibodeau really is about to trade for Derrick Rose. And I sent some texts trying to figure out if it was real or not, try to get some people to hit me back. Hey, who are they thinking about sending? Trying to get something. And I heard about Frank. I heard Frank might be in the discussions, and it ended up coming out that he was indeed in the trade discussions. And I love Frank Ntilikina. I think I've got a jersey right in my dorm closet for Frank Ntilikina. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to react to this rationally. Let me wait until the terms of the trade are official. Then I will make my judgment. When I saw that the New York Knickerbockers gave up a non-rotation player, and to the point where he himself requested to go to the G League. This isn't Austin Rivers getting cut out of the rotation because he stopped trying on defense and he wasn't passed. This is a guy who requested to go to the G League. And on top of that, the other part of the return was the fourth most valuable out of 4 total draft picks in this upcoming draft. Now, the Knicks are going to have 2 picks, if not in, then quite near the lottery via themselves and the Dallas Mavericks. They're going to have what we can only think, especially now that they've dumped Derrick Rose for Dennis Smith Jr., the Detroit Pistons second rounder, which will, I would think, be 31st in the second round.
It's the other way around. The Knicks sent the second rounder to the
So the Pistons, because the Pistons sent talent over to the Knicks, they're even worse now.
Yeah.
So if you thought that pick was going to be 31st before they traded Derrick Rose, man, we are there now. They're going to have 3 draft picks in the top 31, 2 near the lottery, in exchange for an upgrade at backup guard. It sounds like just a lot of on both sides. And when I realized that this trade had real value for the Knicks was when I sat and thought, well, then why the hell did they do this? Because Leon Rose is smart, Walt Perrin is smart, Brock Aller is smart. We've got a competent front office, it seems, from how things have gone since they've been brought on board. Why did they do this trade? What's this trade going to do for us? It's going to make us better this year. It's going to give Thibodeau a guard he can trust. And what I ended up realizing was that the goal for the Knicks this year, which I would argue they are quite successfully achieving as of right now, the main goal was to remove the stench so deeply entrenched within the walls of Madison Square Garden that any NBA fan in the world can smell it from their couch. I mean, this organization was a real dumpster fire. You know it. I know it. I'm not going to lie about it. I've as I look and apologize to the Knicks flag hanging above my bed, this organization was a dumpster fire for years. We're finally de-stinkifying the team. If trying to make the play-in or the playoffs and make a real push is what Tibbs thinks is going to keep getting the best buy-in from these vets, because then none of this happens without Tibbs getting the buy-in, the commitment that he's gotten from the veterans, the players like Julius Randle. If that's how he thinks the best way to go about the rest of this season is, I'm on board, because even if in my head giving up a second rounder for a rental or a guy we might re-sign who's not cooked, but he's not exactly in his prime either, as you mentioned, I'm a little hesitant when I realize that we're not going to remember that either Dennis Smith Jr. or this draft pick were assets of ours 2 years from now if this rebuild goes the way I think it can. I was totally for the trade. Thibodeau gets an old friend back, and in his system, I think having Derrick Rose around to mentor IQ, Obi, RJ, Mitch, and all the young players in a Tom Thibodeau system is not the worst guy. I think he knows his way around a Tibbs offense and defense. I'm in on this trade for the Knicks.
Yeah, let's not act like when they hired Tibbs that this wasn't going to happen. It was just a matter of when.
We already have Taj, too.
Yeah. I think it's a good move for the Knicks. I don't think there's anything else you can say besides that. They got a good player who's familiar with his system, and I think they're trying to separate themselves from this pack of bottom feeders that they're starting to go on to and elevate themselves to what we're seeing out of a young, good team like the Hornets. The Knicks want to make the playoffs this year, and Derrick Rose is going to help them potentially achieve that goal.
That is all the time we have for our NBA discussion today. And, it's interesting stuff going on in New York basketball, where it is the big national story for the first time in a while, especially down in Brooklyn. So we will say goodbye to the NBA. We'll say goodbye to Chris. Thank you for joining us, as always. And then we're going to come back. Jack and I are going to chat some MLB and chat about a certain favorite player of Jack's being dealt away from the Boston Red Sox. So stick with us, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. Alrighty, welcome back to One-on-One Nightly, the Wednesday edition of New York's longest running sports call-in show. Jack Roach is here. I'm Chris Hennessy. Alex Wold's keeping us on the air as always and doing a fantastic job at such. Our plan was to talk MLB and CBA work stoppage stuff, and we're going to do that, but breaking news coming out of the MLB, and it involves Steve Cohen and the Mets, even though as somewhat of a side. And it's the left fielder of the Boston Red Sox, Andrew Benintendi, going from Boston to the Kansas City Royals. I know we all know he was a big part of the 2018 World Series run, a big part of this team really since he came up a few years back. And now he goes to a Kansas City team who appears to be kind of rebuilding and putting some stuff together to try and make a run in an AL Central that got weaker with the loss of Trevor Bauer and Francisco Lindor. So on the Benintendi front, it's a tough move to go from Boston to Kansas City, but a team that is a little bit more ready to compete than the rebuilding Red Sox.
Yeah, Benintendi was a guy that skyrocketed through the minors, drafted 7th overall out of
Arkansas, I think.
Arkansas, right? Razorbacks. And he really didn't face a ton of adversity until these past couple seasons. He was such an integral part of that World Series winning 2018 Red Sox team. I'm sure we all remember that incredible grab he made in left field off of Alex Bregman. You remember that line drive, left field,
Yep.
saved. I mean, that would have blown the game open and would have changed the course of that season. And he just hasn't been very good since that happened. He's really struggled, and unfortunately, it seems like he just needed a change of scenery. And while I'm sad that his tenure with the Sox will not go on, I'm glad to see him going to a younger team where he'll be more of a focal point for them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think he has shown that potential, and he's been playing poorly on bad Red Sox teams. Like since they beat the Dodgers, they haven't been good. They haven't been back to the playoffs. And yeah, the year between 2019 they were okay, and last year they were pretty brutal.
They're awful.
And they'll probably be pretty brutal again this year.
Hey, by the way, before you go on, guess what Fangraphs projected for the Sox this year? Guess how many wins?
Out of 162, right? Okay.
162.
I'll go 67.
They gave them 87.
87. That's a lot of wins. It's a lot of wins for a team.
I don't know where these wins are coming from, man. They gave the Red Sox a 50.4% chance of making the playoffs.
Oh my.
So
did they forget the expanded playoffs didn't pass through CBA? Like, is that what the issue is here? Like,
I don't know, but I've been a Fangraphs believer. I love Fangraphs. I want to quote them later today, but man, I don't know how I feel about the Sox being projected.
Oh God.
7 wins.
That's tough. Okay, so the return, if we could pull back from that, Franchy, Cordero, and at least one other player from the Mets go to Boston. The Mets get offensive prospect Khalil Lee. So the return unknown for the Red Sox, which I think is the most important part of this, because it sounds like the Mets are getting this highly touted outfield prospect in Lee, but they're giving somebody to the Red Sox. So in at least the New York realm, right, it's going to be important who goes to the Red Sox. Could it be a reliever in a Familiar Betances situation? Could it be, are they preparing for Khalil Lee to be a major leaguer soon? Who knows? So what is interesting is it does not fill the center field need for the Mets. We've discussed the center field need, and if they potentially could go get Jackie Bradley Jr., this does not fill that. So an interesting trade that is still trying to fit all the pieces together. So stay tuned with that one to see how that one shakes out. So back to what we were going to talk about before. Up until about 48 hours ago, it was unknown if this season was going to start on time for Major League Baseball, which pitchers and catchers are reporting in 6 days for the New York Yankees and 7 days for the New York Mets. And we didn't know that until about a couple days ago. And the first spring training games are in about 2 weeks, and the season will start 162 games in April, which is scary considering what we know and what we don't know more accurately about the coronavirus and its spread and all of that. And in addition to that, Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York said that arenas will be allowed to open starting 2 weeks from yesterday. And that will start with a Nets game and a Knicks game on the same night. And shortly after that, the Rangers and the Islanders will play as well. And there will be fans in the stands for Yankees and Mets. So we'll see how it kind of breaks down with that season. But we don't know about 162. What we do know, no designated hitter in the National League, no expanded playoffs. We're back to 5 teams. But yes, to 7-inning doubleheaders. And the most egregious of all, the runner on second base in extra innings. You start, Jack, because I have opinions about these 4 topics.
When I heard of these 4 proposals, I had the complete opposite thinking here. I thought DH, yes, expanded playoffs, they're just going to have to live with it. The old Jimmy Sullivan, they got it in. They're not going to be able to have a league without it. So I expected the expanded playoffs to remain in place. And I think a lot of people wanted the universal DH. I was definitely one of those people. And I'm a little bummed out that it's not there this season. And it just kind of rubs me the wrong way that there are baseball games and extra innings with a runner that starts on second base. I'm not the type of guy that'll say that's not baseball, because I believe in change. I believe that MLB needs to do something different, but I just don't think that this is what they need.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on a lot of fronts, and I'll start by saying I'm also not the kind of person who is, stick their cleats in the mud. No, this is not baseball. I don't think that. I think that this era guy should be in the Hall of Fame. I think that the designated hitter should be in the National League. I don't think that you should start extra innings with a runner on second base. That's the kind of stuff that you do in Little League when it's 6:26 and your field time runs out at 6:30 and the sun is going down. That's not Major League Baseball. You also shouldn't have 7 inning doubleheaders. That's the kind of stuff you do, name it, in Little League. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I played 6 inning doubleheaders when I was 12. I think that they could play 9 inning doubleheaders when they're getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Also, the doubleheader basically doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, it kind of exists with COVID, but after COVID, knock on wood that there's an after COVID, it's not going to exist. It didn't exist before it, and it's not going to exist after it. So who cares? Just play 9 inning games the 4 times a year you get rained out. I don't understand. But the universal DH, for me, it comes down to one thing. Watch the World Series games at the National League Park and convince me that there should be pitchers hitting. Just watch the American League pitchers when they get up in that batter's box and convince me that that's the best showing of baseball that we can put out there for the public. Because let's be real, if interleague play exists, obviously, nobody is watching Mets Red Sox in July. Nobody's watching it. We all know that. People are watching the World Series, except for you and I, of course. But people are watching the World Series. And there was one particular one. I don't know why this one sticks out because it happens every single year, but I believe it was Eduardo Rodriguez from the Red Sox in 2018 who stood in the batter's box against the Dodgers and looked like he was getting his head chopped off by a chainsaw. He looked like a dead man. And it's what is he doing in the batter's box? There's the runner on second base in the 7th inning of the freaking World Series, and there's a guy up there who's never hit a baseball before. It's something out of a dream. I don't understand why there's still pitchers in it and why it's just not consistency. If you want pitchers to hit, that's fine. Then pitchers should hit. If you don't want pitchers to hit, that's fine. Then pitchers shouldn't hit. The fact that it's different is infuriating to me, and it looked like we were finally going to get over that, and we finally did get over that in this World Series, and they're just going back. It makes no sense to me. I actually don't hate the expanded playoffs being rescinded, although that ridiculous day of all that baseball was so much fun, and I enjoyed every second of it. I do think that the 5 team is better because there were teams in that playoffs that just had no chance of winning the World Series. But the 2 teams who ended up getting there were very, very viable candidates to win the World Series. If it was Reds Marlins in the NLCS, we've been having a very different conversation. But I'm not terribly against the no expanded playoffs. The no DH in the National League to me is just pure insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And look, there's going to be a work stoppage next year. Let's hope we get in 162 next year because it doesn't feel like we're getting 162 in next year. And it's not going to be because of COVID.
Yeah, the MLB and players associations, that relationship is so badly fractured. And I just hope, going back to the DH, I just hope that we get the universal out of it because a lot of, I've heard people talk about the Bartolo Colon home run is one of their favorite sports moments. And yeah, that was awesome. But do you remember every single other at bat for his entire career? It's embarrassing to the game of baseball. No one wants to see that except for the 1 in a million time when something funny happens. And even guys like Madison Bumgarner, who are good hitters, yeah, they're good hitters for guys that are traditionally awful. He is still a far below average MLB hitter.
Yeah, I don't know. It never made sense to me, in my brain as a small child, that MLB had 2 different rules books. That never exactly processed. And here I am at 21 still saying it still doesn't process. I don't get it. But I mean, whatever. I guess you can have your pitchers hitting. Yahoo. If you're local, it helps the Mets to have a designated hitter because you have a place to put Dom Smith / Pete Alonso on a nightly basis put Jeff McNeil back in a second base position. It just helps the flow of that offense and defense a lot more. And now they don't have it. They just signed Jonathan Villar of the Marlins, formerly the Orioles, to be kind of a Ronnie Torres kind of situation, a hybrid player across the infield. So maybe that'll help in that situation, giving guys nights off. But the DH would have helped the Mets a lot, and it's not there. So speaking of the Mets, they have made a lot of moves, but they've also not made a lot of moves. Kind of a weird situation. They get Francisco Lindor, the best player moved this offseason. They get Carrasco, who will help bolster their starting rotation. But of the four main free agents, they lose out on all four of them, three of which to the Phillies, the Yankees, and the Dodgers, in Real Muto, LeMahieu, and Bauer. So having said all that, how do you feel about their chances in the NL East against the Braves team, who is still very good and just added Charlie Morton?
Yeah, I think both of those teams are headed for the playoffs, and it's just a matter of which one comes into form down the stretch. And to me, I don't know how much it matters who wins the division, because there are two NL West teams that are a whole lot better than either one of them, like miles ahead. And we can sit here and talk about who has the advantage in the NL East, but at the end of the day, if they're not good enough to make the World Series, what's the end game here?
Well, I think it's interesting because of the wild card game, right? We're going back to the 5-team format. So the wild card game is going to be Mets Padres, Mets Dodgers, Braves Padres, Braves Dodgers. And if it's any other combination of teams, I'm going to be quite surprised. And if it's Braves Dodgers, how about the NLCS being all the way bumped back to an NL wild card game that from one year to another? So that would be very interesting. And you make a good point that that's four teams right there who are basically locks for the division. So how about the other guys? I don't know. It's very interesting in terms of, all four of those teams are in like the top 5 or 6 in terms of favorites for the World Series. And it's hard to believe that any team other than those four are going to make it out of the National League as pennant winners. And you know what? Did Trevor Bauer get overpaid? Yes, he did. But does that make an impact in terms of if I'm picking the Dodgers, the Mets, and the NLCS? Absolutely, it does. I'm not that high on Trevor Bauer. I think he got way, way, way overpaid, and the Mets might have made out gangbusters on this one. But it comes down to the NLCS, and it's Trevor Bauer against David Peterson. We're gonna find out why he's worth $45 million, I guess.
Yeah, I'm definitely not in the boat of Mets fans or baseball fans that are like, oh, well, the Mets dodged a bullet, not signed Trevor Bauer. Like, he is, like, maybe he's not Garrett Cole level. Maybe he's not.
No, he's not Garrett Cole, and he's not Jake DeGrom, and he's not Clayton Kershaw. He's not. He's just simply not.
You're paying him for 3 years. The Dodgers are paying him for 3 years. And you know what? They're paying him a lot of money. But if it doesn't work out, you took a well worth it risk. Well worth it. He won the Cy Young this past season. He has been so good everywhere that he's been.
Yeah, 100%. I think the short contract helps. If this was a 4-year, $40 million, 5-year, $40 million contract, I'm way out on it. At 2 years, $85 million with an opt out that he's probably going to take because the third year is only 17 mil. Only 17 mil. Hello. The Trevor Bauer thing is really tough. When I heard that contract, I was like, oh, $40 million the first year. Oh, $45 million the second year. And I realized that's 2 years, $85 million. Yeah, it's a lot. But if the Mets are going to win a World Series, it's probably going to be in the next 3 years, 4 years, because all their pieces are there now with the additions of Lindor and Carrasco. To me, they maybe need one more reliever, and all their pieces are there. And Bauer might put them over the hump. I don't know. And let's fast forward to even September, regular season, and Trevor Bauer steps on the hill at Citi Field. Yeah, he's going to get booed because of the craziness on social media and his website and Let's Go Mets stuff in his store and the signed Mets hat, literally insane.
I love that, by the way.
Oh God, I hate it.
I
I
love
think he's
it.
nuts. I think he's nuts, and I'm so happy he's not a Yankee. But he's gonna get booed out of his mind. But if he beats the Mets and clinches the 1 seed and plays him getting home in the LCS, then it's gonna feel like it's worth it. I don't know. It's a very interesting situation.
Yeah, and you know that his social media antics would only make that sting even worse.
Yeah.
As if this first, act of rejection wasn't enough.
For sure. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on One-on-One Nightly. We thank you for joining us tonight. And every Wednesday night, right where you are right now, Twitter, YouTube, whichever one it is, you can find that 9:30 every Wednesday night. Make sure you tune in 11 p.m. on Saturday night into Sunday morning for One-on-One. That will be Facebook 90.7 and YouTube. For Jack Roach, for Chris Persianen, for Alex Wolves on the controls, I'm Chris Hennessy. Thank you for joining us, and get some sleep.